Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Mudd from the Support Center and I'm the Director of Family and Communication. Welcome and thank you for joining me for our Family Partnership Processes virtual intake training for program year 2021. I am going to turn my camera off. I just wanted to give you a peek at who was behind the scenes, as this way it will allow me to better facilitate this webinar and manipulate the slides, because this is a live recording that you're watching. So welcome and let's get started. All right, so after today's training, you will be able to implement refinements to our intake in a virtual setting with families. You'll also be able, after today, to use new tools to build relationships and have meaningful conversations with families. While this is a live recorded webinar, I wanted to be able to make this more interactive instead of just having you look at screens for the time together. So you will have a reflection sheet that you should have downloaded that looks like this screenshot in front of you. So make sure you have that. And every time you see this button appear on screen, you can pause the video to fill out the reflection question and any prompts or any other activities that I ask you to do. When you're done with that question or activity, you'll return to the webinar, unpause the video, and hear the answer and continue the training. Please note, you can also pause as needed to take notes, jot down questions, or even rewind a segment. If you're watching this as a team, you may be discussing your reflections as a group before unpausing. Feel free to also pause the webinar at other points in time if you want to have a group discussion or ask each other questions. If you're watching this by yourself, make sure you use the form to debrief with your supervisor shortly after this training. All right, so we are here for virtual intakes. You'll have your reflection sheet. There's a couple other handouts and things that you may have in front of you. So I'll give you a second to get organized and then we'll get started. So let's start with a review. As we virtually engage with families, the goals of the intake have not changed, right? The reasons for us having these intakes as part of our family partnership process are exactly the same, right? And the core competencies that you use to reach the goal of this interaction with the family have not changed. So let's think about this for a minute, right? Think down when you think about the lens of our intakes traditionally with the family engagement contract and the family success roadmap. What is the goal of that interaction? Why are we meeting with the family? Why are we going over these things with our families, right? So take a moment to think about what the goals of the interactions are for intake. And I'll give you a hint. These were introduced to you as part of group training all the way back probably in February and March, right? And I know that feels really long ago, right? So do your best and talk together as a group, or something that you'll see in a little bit when we go to the next slide. And then when you're done thinking about the goals of intake, right? Come up with a few core competencies, right? Your family engagement three-legged stool that you'll use to meet these goals. All right, so now pause the video and use that reflection sheet to jot down your thoughts. Welcome back. Hope you had a good reflection discussion and thinking about the goals of the intake interaction. Here are some that you might have jotted down, and these come directly from that tool, as I said, we introduced as part of your group coaching planning, right? The goal of the intake is to initiate a relationship building by learning about families and their hopes and dreams, right? Again, this hasn't changed. This is the whole purpose, whether you're virtual, the family's remote, or their child is attending in person. The intake in our family and partnership process is all about relationships. You might also have jotted down that it's a chance to build motivation for our partnership, right? You're getting the family excited about the new year, you know, what we're going to commit to, what they're going to commit to, all towards their child's success, and really get them excited to join in with us in all the different ways that we partner together with families in our program. You might also have jotted down that we're creating a safe, trusting space for families, right? This is a chance they haven't met you very much, right? It's even more important going to be in a virtual space and over video to really set the tone, right? Create this safe, welcoming space where they can learn to trust you. And it's hard in the beginning, and these are steps towards being able to really fulfill an equal partnership together. Another thing you might have written down is that the intake, the goal of it, right, is you're there to help gain a deeper understanding of the family's circumstances and strengths, right? You're getting to know them, all of their uniquenesses, what their strengths are, what their successes are, what's going really well, right? What works at home that they hope to see work in the program. And where are their potential challenging circumstances, right? Where are they most vulnerable, or really want to tap into you to brainstorm and problem solve together. The final goal of the interaction you might have written down is that this is also, particularly through our roadmap, a way that you're going to identify areas for immediate support and follow-up, right? So that should be a review, right? And as I said, this has not changed, even though we're making some refinements to being able to do this virtually with families as a result of COVID-19. Then on to the next question, right? I asked you to think about your core competencies. These are all of those attitudes, skills, and beliefs that you're bringing into this interaction to make sure that you can meet those goals. In order to be able to initiate that relationship and create a safe, trusting space, for example, you might have written down things like unconditional positive regard, or what we like to call UPR. You're going to be establishing an equal power dynamic. You're going to use all your great active listening skills, paraphrasing, asking open-ended questions to learn more, right? And dig deeper to learn about that family. You're going to be, building rapport through your body language, your smiles, your eye contact, all that's much more important in a virtual setting as well. You're going to show enthusiasm. I know you're probably stressed out there and there's a lot going on as we reopen, right? But we know that enthusiasm and motivation is contagious, as well as, having that shared space together. And we'll talk a little about that more in a bit. Similar to active listening and those open-ended questions, you'll ask meaningful questions to learn more, right? There's a purpose to our open-ended questions, that they move us towards those goals of building a relationship, so that you get nuggets from the family, right? To be able to use those to have future conversations and be able to remind each other the things you've talked about in the past. You might have written down that you'll avoid jargon. That's a core competency, right? We've got a lot of terms, and you're going to work hard to make sure that you're using family-friendly language and they really understand our approach. As we know, we have a lot of Acelero acronyms out there. And finally, another one you might have written down is you're watching your speaking to listening ratio. This is a chance for the parent to tell you about themselves, right? Let them do a lot of the talking, and you'll do a lot of listening and waiting and making sure that it's not just your agenda to get through, but what the parent wants to talk to you about and share, right? And there's probably many others from our three-legged stool you wrote down. All right, so this should start to feel pretty similar, right? That's what I'm going for. It's just a review for you. So let's continue that theme and thinking about why did we make changes to our family partnership process and the intakes itself, right? Well, the most obvious one is due to COVID-19, right? The precautions we needed to make is that we needed to move our process virtually and simplify it for that setting, right? We know that a lot of the forms that we use, paper is not conducive to a virtual setting, right? And so we wanted to really be mindful of that. We also made changes so that we're not asking families duplicate information we could have gotten elsewhere, maybe from the application, from the home visit that the teachers may do virtually, right? And all future opportunities that we're going to have to communicate with families. We also recognize that many families may be juggling a lot at home still, right? And we want to maximize their time online and make the most of that, right? And so how can, again, we really simplify and streamline and focus on what's most important, right? That relationship building, which leads to the next bullet. We don't want to lose our top priority of building a relationship with families. You as staff are not going to be able to see families every day in person, right? In face-to-face things inside the building, right? So relationships are going to still matter, but in a new way. We also know that many of us are still feeling very isolated and full of so many mixed emotions, right? We're still living through this pandemic and trying to navigate the current reality, right? And so we know that relationships matter in these stressful times, right? In times of crisis, relationships act as what the field often calls a protective factor. It can create some buffer, right? And you're part of that relationship. Acelero is part of that community. And so again, just like our intakes before, we want to set that stage and really make this about the relationship and not make this about another check off the box meeting that they have to have with us that's full of rules and regulations and our policies, right? It's to get to know you. The other thing we wanted to do when we made these changes is that we wanted to make sure that we weren't just starting right as business as usual, right? The old way that we were doing these last year, right? That we are going through a collective stressor together. And we need to acknowledge and listen to and hear about the family's experience with the pandemic, the current climate, and their feelings about reopening. We need to start in that space and hold space for whatever parents are willing to share, right? That if we just jump right into everything and not acknowledging that, it just didn't feel right. It didn't make sense to not start there, right? So you'll see in the changes that the conversation is much more relevant to the current situation. Finally, and next, we then really spent time reviewing our current family engagement contract. And upon reviewing that, we saw that many of our expectations just weren't relevant and didn't apply given the pandemic, such as discussions about volunteering or certain aspects of Shine On Families that aren't going to look the same or aren't going to be able to be done since we're not in the centers with families. Heck, even parts of our attendance messaging is different now, right? So we really studied that, and again, because this is a virtual setting, we actually have removed the paper family engagement contract itself from the intake process. With that said, I know you're already like, whoa, there's no contract, there's no paper, right? But I'll be going over this shortly in today's training, is I still wanted to give you a tool and guidance for your intake conversation, right? So I created a PowerPoint for you to use with families. Like I said, I'm going to walk through this with you, and it has lots of prompts and lots of visuals that will still be able to have this focused, rich conversation to get to know that family. Finally, you've heard me say we a lot, right? And why we made these changes. And I want to acknowledge that when creating these refinements and changes, I and the support center, we utilize a work group of coordinators from across the network who brought the perspective and expertise from you all on the ground, from their experiences doing intakes and the last couple of months about what it's taken to do some things virtually. And really, again, hone in on what's most important, given what everyone's collectively experiencing, how people are feeling mixed about reopening and acknowledging their current situation. And then we made those recommendations with the coordinators to your directors and assistant directors of family services and health, who offered further feedback and refinements. And so you'll see that the changes we're introducing you today are due to lots of collaboration and input with you all in mind about what it's been like to operate in this way. So thank you to that think tank of coordinators and your teams for making the virtual intakes in this format possible. So, I've alluded to this a little bit and why we made the changes, but I really wanted to pull out for you what is the same and different in our virtual intakes, right? I've already talked to you about your family engagement core competencies are the same. The goals of the interaction are the same, right? Those things haven't changed as we kicked off today's training. It's still relationship based. And it's still one of your very first opportunities to get to know the family more deeply and more uniquely. We have kept the beautiful hope and dream conversation starter, right? It is such a nice thing to be able to bridge into what our partnership is going to be able to do to fulfill those hopes and dreams and the goals we have for each other to close the achievement gap and have their child ready for lifelong success. We also still include the family success roadmap. And above all, the one thing that is still the same is that the intake, again, is a critical piece of our family partnership process. It's an opportunity to get to know the family and talk about our shared commitments to their child's learning and success and what we will do on our end to fulfill that partnership, even without a paper family engagement contract. So what's different? What's different is driven exactly from why we made these changes, right? That we're virtual, we still have COVID-19 safety precautions in place, right? And so again, we need to be able to simplify this process for a virtual setting. What's different now is that we are recommending and prefer that you use a video app, whether that's Zoom or Google Meet, to do these intakes. As I briefly mentioned and we'll go over, we created a PowerPoint that's family facing. We removed the paper family engagement contract. And you'll be starting by asking about COVID-19 and reopening experiences and safety and health questions. The things then again to simplify our intake and really focus on that relationship and their hopes and dreams and the partnership is that we removed the peer card and mantra demo. This was also a clear one that some things, again, weren't relevant given the current climate, but also knowing that it'd be hard to do virtually. Demoing a peer card is one of those things, right? We also wanted to reduce the amount of information that families are getting at one time, so they're not overwhelmed with everything, right? And this is not a one-shot deal. We all know this, right? Our intakes are just the beginning of lots of opportunities to talk about our partnership, to talk about our program, and to get to know our families and engage them in the work together. So we removed the attendance discussion that's typically in intakes, volunteering, We've removed a handbook review, so you're not going to go over the handbook in depth and page by page. You're not going to collect missing application papers. That was all done in the remote application process in those 2 sections. And then one of the big things that's different is we simplified the Family Success Roadmap, again, for a virtual setting, and we transferred it to a Google form. And I'll be going over that in depth later on today. And then we extended the timeline for our intakes. So that is what I'm going to be going over in a little bit more depth about what's the same and what's different. So now let's talk about this extended timeline I mentioned. So on your screen, and this is also available as a handout, is a timeline of our family partnership processes as a result of the COVID-19 refinements. The first 2 buckets you'll see right here reflect our remote application eligibility and enrollment paperwork that happens in 2 sections, right? And then which the child is accepted. So the biggest change then to the timeline is in our ISP and policies and procedures. While we prefer to have you conduct your intakes before the child's first day, right? We know that in our current reality and the amount of virtual contacts with families as school starts, right? And potentially a lot of things to be juggling and a lot of people to be interacting with, we have extended the timeline for you to complete the intake within 30 days of entry during peak enrollment season. So that's different, right? So now you have within 30 days of entry during peak season to conduct these virtual intakes. Again, knowing that the preference is before the child's first day, but the reality of the situation is that you'll probably need more time, as will the families. But also knowing this longer timeline and to address concerns that families may be reluctant to meet after their child starts, you're going to use that acceptance call to preview and schedule the next series of contacts with families, right? Go over the purpose and value of the intake with the family. And as you actually schedule the virtual intake during the acceptance call, right? So that gets on their radar, then you have something to remind them about that's coming up and continue to build that motivation in their comfort about what's to come and how that this is a chance to get to know each other through conversations, right? And then as part of this acceptance call, you'll preview that this is preferred to be done by video app. So you can talk to the family at this time about if they have a preference for Zoom or Google Meet, if there's any technology barriers or issues that you want to troubleshoot together, right? Maybe they just need a little help on how to download Google Meet. So that's an opportunity to the acceptance call. Really think about that as a way to set up success for not only your virtual intakes that will take place, but also future check-ins with families. You'll also see on this timeline, right, 2 things. There's this red box here, right, of additional family-facing communications to help welcome and orient families back into our programs or for the first time, right? Dr. Sip will have an orientation video. We have the handbook addendum and the reopening FAQ document. Teachers and classrooms and centers are doing some virtual tours to help families get really connected to what's going on inside the building. And then teachers will maybe doing virtual home visits. All right, so you have that just to know what else is surrounding virtual intakes. And then finally, in this last box, the other thing that has definitely not changed is follow up to our family success roadmaps and goal partnerships, right? This remains an expectation as does ongoing engagement and contact with the family. Okay, so now that I've given you some background and rationale for what's changed, what's the same, and talk to you about the timeline for completing these intakes and the different touch points you'll have with families as part of the family partnership process, let's look at the new format for our virtual intakes. I like to really call this the conversation flow of the intake itself. So the first step of the conversation, right, is you're now going to ask about the experience with the pandemic and learn more about the family, right? This is, as I said in the beginning, why we made these changes, that we don't want to just start out as business as usual or that nothing is different, right? We're going through something unprecedented. And so again, spending time in that space and giving families the opportunity, if they'd like, to talk about what it's been like over the last several months, right? And as a chance to dig deeper around that and leverage that. Then the next part of the conversation, right, is you're going to transition into listening to families about their reopening feelings, right? How's it's been going, right? How are they feeling about it? And any questions that they have about safety and health in our program, right? And I'll go through these in more detail when I show you that family-facing PowerPoint that I hinted at. So those two things are new to our traditional intake. And then you get to this part in the intake that's totally the same, right? That lovely hope and dream question that they have for their child, right? And then how you use that hope and dream starter to initiate that partnership. Wow, great, right? That's such a nice hope and dream. And we're going to work together as partners to help meet that hope and dream you have for your child and contribute to their learning and success here at Acelero. And then again, remember when I talked about why we made the changes and what's the same and what's different. This is part of traditionally where you have gone through the expectations outlined in the contract. Because we remove the contract, you're still talking about our partnership. But we only wanted to highlight again the most important aspects that made sense because we're virtually and because families aren't coming into our program and what really are the most relevant for them to know. First, which we've always wanted to do, is to ask the family, right, because we've removed that paper contract, is how the family defines our partnership. What does partnership mean to them? What would they like to see us do, right? And what do they want to contribute to this partnership? Really, a really nice open-ended question to get them thinking about what partnership means for them and what it looks like and what expectations they have for us. Right? And a lot of times, you know, that alignment is the same, right? They want open communication. They want to feel welcome. They want to feel that we're honoring them and getting to know them and their child and building on their strengths and targeting things to them as individuals, right? So some of those things, you know, really, really resonate in the ways they define our partnership and how we do. Right? So after you kind of, again, have this really nice conversation starter, then you'll go into a very brief overview of Shine On Families and Shine at Home 2.0, right? Depending on their program option. Again, we've removed going into detail about Shine On Families because a lot, again, can't happen in the centers. FENS, for example, will look very different. And, you know, not demoing a peer card, not going through the mantra or the book, right, is all different. You're just giving some highlights. Same thing with Shine at Home 2.0. And I'll go again through this in a little bit more detail when I flip to the other family-facing PowerPoint. Then when we looked at the contract, right, me and my coordinator think tank and the directors, we kept the piece about welcoming family and voice and building social capital via virtual center meetings, right? This is your opportunity, again, to build that excitement, encourage them to attend, that while we can't see you face to face inside the building, we're going to do a lot of ways to get to know you, for you to meet other families through virtual center meetings. The next part to highlight in our partnership with families that really bubbled up as critical is the importance of consistent two-way communications, right? Because we can't see each other face to face and the safety precautions that are going on, we're going to be using a lot of different methods this year, right? Text, email, social media, the Remind system, right? Video-based applications like Zoom and Google Meet or FaceTime and Duo, right? All of those different ways, and the importance of sharing information on a regular basis back and forth, so that, again, families feel a part of and connected to you and the program and their classroom, regardless of being able to see you face to face every day. Again, this is a chance too for you to talk to the family and spend time with them about their preferred methods, right? What apps do they like, right? Do they rather receive text or emails, right? And the frequency of contact with you. Part of that partnership, right? And the give and take is how often do you want to hear from me, right? You know, and establishing that kind of baseline together. And then we kept the piece of the contract where we honor family strengths and circumstances, which then segues into the next part of the conversation about the adult's own hopes and dreams, right? This is a nice conversation prompt to ask them, you know, we talked about the hopes and dreams you have for your child, but what do you have for yourself? What aspirations do you have, right? Which then can segue into the family success roadmap, and finalizing then after the roadmap on next steps and agreements that you might have made and summarizing those commitments. And that is the new conversation flow of the intake, right? So there is a new tool, as I promised in the very beginning of today's training, which is this family-facing PowerPoint, right? Because we took out the family engagement in paper form, it's clear you still are going to need and want something to guide that conversation. And because families are going to be on Zoom or Google Meet, we felt like it would be really fun visuals for you and families to look at something together while you're online. And so this PowerPoint can be brought up as a screen share for you to look at. And it's really visual and it's really simple. It's really family friendly. And it's a nice way for them to follow along in the conversation. And they'll see the main question prompt on the slide, on the screen. And it'll give them time to think about it, right? Yeah, what are my hopes and dreams? Oh, what has life been like during the pandemic these past couple months, right? And each slide in this PowerPoint mirrors these steps of the conversation flow. So there's a slide plus talking points for each of these steps. There's also the welcome one you see, and a slide for general introductions, and then a thank you at the end. And what you see right now online here is a screenshot of what, if you were using Zoom, would look like, with a video of you at the top, the family in the other video screen, and then the PowerPoint as a full slideshow to look at together, right? And it'll really guide you and give you something to look at together, right? And again, so there's the family-facing slide view, and then each slide comes complete with some talking points, some prompts, some question banks for you to pull from in the notes section of each slide, right? So you know just what you can highlight and put into your own words to keep this really moving forward and highlighting the parts, again, of our partnership that everyone felt was the most important to build that relationship, right? So let's take a look and do a little bit deeper dive into this family-facing PowerPoint. So what you see online now is your version of the family facing PowerPoint, right? This is the part where each slide, as I said, has these talking points in the note sections that you would print out ahead of time and be able to prepare and practice with, right? So each slide has it. So this is your view before the intake, right? And also, this family-facing PowerPoint is now available in English, Spanish, Arabic, and Haitian Creole. So you can ask families which preference they have to see this PowerPoint, right? So then this is an example of when you're doing that full slideshow with families, an example of what the slide in English, Spanish, Arabic, and Haitian Creole would look like for the family, right? They're not going to see your talking points. They can't see your web browser or your desktop, right? Similar to what you're seeing with me today, right? And I know some of you are probably thinking, well, what if they're not on video? And we'll get to that. But the short answer is, if they want this PowerPoint emailed to them, if they have that access, this family-facing PowerPoint is available as a PDF. If that's not an option and you're just on phone, this PowerPoint, again, still acts as your tool to guide your conversation, right? That you have in front of you to make sure you're following along with the flow and haven't missed anything, right? So it really has lots of great purposes. All right, so I'm going to now flip into that PowerPoint so that you can see that. So bear with me a minute while I stop this one for the time being and then bring up this one. Okay, so give me a moment here. Let me walk you through this, right? Again, this is the view that you will have as you prepare ahead of time and see what's in the talking points. And this is how you would share it ahead of time with families for what they would see, of course, but with your videos showing on top, right? So if you were on camera, right, like this, right? And then of course the family would be next to you in their video. All right, so that's what it would look like from the family's perspective. Right? So there's that first welcome slide. And then here is that just general intro slide that I mentioned to you about, where you're gonna, meet with that family. Oh, Miss Jones, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I'm sure you have a lot to juggle and, being at home and making the time. I really appreciate it. As I mentioned on the phone when I called you and we scheduled this, right? The purpose of today is for us to just get to know each other as partners in your child's success. Right? And then you can do just some really fun intros. And in these talking points, again, are just some suggestions for how you might do that kind of fun icebreaker introduction, right? A fun fact about yourself or your background, right? Then asking the family to formally introduce them, their child's name and age might be something you ask about. And that similar fun fact question about them, right? Something just kind of ease into this conversation, right? And you guys have all kinds of great ways that you have typically entered into intakes to welcome families into your virtual office space, right? So keep that up. So that's there to just kick it off, right? Then the next slide is that step of getting to know you and talking about acknowledging and listening to the family's experience during the last several months with COVID-19, right? Simply asking this prompt right here, what has life been like for you and your family during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And giving them that space to talk to you about it as much or as little as they want, right? Then in this talking point, there's a bunch of other prompts that you might want to use, right? If you're stuck or need something to continue the conversation or go deeper, right? To build on that, right? Well, tell me a little bit about routines, right? This is your chance to get into knowing some of that stuff. What was working really well, right? What do you find challenging? What's been hard, right? So additional things to kind of keep that going if you need them. And you might have other open-ended questions based on this first starter, right? What's been life like for you and your family, right? You may have others that you'll have in mind that you want to brainstorm ahead of time. Right? So that is being in that space around the pandemic. That's how you're going to start off this intake. All right. Then there was that second step of safety and health, right? And talking to them about reassuring them about our priority of safety and health. But again, because this is a way to get to know them, talking to them about their feelings and experiences around reopening. Now, this is the only part of using this PowerPoint with families that has a little bit of a technical aspect to it, right? Because again, you're going to have families that might be in our center-based in-person option or doing the home learning Shine at Home 2.0 option. Also, because of when you might be doing these intakes, right? If it's peak enrollment season and the child's already started, or ideally before the child's first day, right? There's kind of 4 different prompts to use. And so because there are 4 different options, as well as 4 PowerPoints in each of the languages translated, I didn't want to have 16 PowerPoints floating out there. That would be really confusing. So before you have your intake, you'll know, okay, I'm talking to Mrs. Jones, for example, and she's in our center-based option, and she and her child have already started, right? So you look down into your talking points and said, okay, center-based option already started. And this bolded prompt is the question you'll use. How has the start of the school year been so far, right? So you'll remove the part that says insert question, and you'll have it in there ahead of time so that when you use the family-facing version of this on Zoom or Google, for example, that question will already be tailored to that family's option and whether they started or not, right? So then you can say, oh, how has the start of the school been so far? If they haven't started, right, you would have the other question. How are you feeling about your child starts as our center reopens, right? Giving them again this space to acknowledge that we all are having mixed emotions by this, and there's kind of no right or wrong experience and feelings around this, but we want to hear from families, right? That's really, you know, honoring them in their time and the reality versus just jumping in again to paperwork and compliance and all these other things, right? The other part of this slide, once you have this conversation prompt in there, is families are going to have our handbook addendum, the FAQ, right? They're going to be getting other things from the teacher and the center about all of our COVID-19 precautions. So we don't expect you as advocates. This is not the chance to review all of those precautions and all those handouts and all those policies and procedures, right? That detracts from the relationship, right? And that's a lot for you all also to have to navigate. So you're going to just make sure that parents have those things. And if they have any questions for you, right, just any questions they have about safety and health that you can answer. If you can't answer those questions or concerns, you tell them, like, you know, that's something I actually don't know offhand. Let me look in our policies and procedures and get back to you. Or let me talk to my coordinator, director, or center director, and we'll be in touch. Thank you for sharing that question or concern, right? So just a little bit of a space here. And then finally, before you move on to the next slide with families, is that, again, here's some more talking points, is that you want to make sure you close this out with messaging that we're committed to creating a sense of community, right? Families are our partners and they're part of this community. And we want to keep your child, you, and all of our staff healthy, right? So to do that, for everyone's safety, just a little reminder to keep you or your child home if anyone's exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms. And then if healthy, like, we look forward to seeing you every day so we can learn and grow and partner in this together, right? Just a little bit of messaging around safety and health and attendance, right? Without going into our traditional space of attendance, right? Because things are so different right now, right? And again, keeping in mind our rationale for the intakes, right? And then here in slide 5 is what you have always done, right? That hope and dream you have for your child, right? And this slide is animated so that after they share, you have this like, great, let's talk about how we're going to partner together to achieve that, right? This is also a chance too, if from that question bank and from your own open-ended questions, to ask families if there's anything else they want you to know before they start as they've been starting, right? Things that they want to share with you that they haven't thought of, right? Then as I mentioned in that conversation flow is asking the families, right? Honoring them and saying, what does our partnership look like to you, right? What is your vision for how we'll work together? What expectations do you have of us? What do you want to do, right? Again, being in that space and giving them a chance, right? And then slide 7 are the pieces on each of these 4 green squares of what you're going to highlight about our partnership, right? These are just a few of the ways we're going to partner, right? Again, we know families have potentially limited time online. This isn't our only one-shot contact with families, right? They're going to hear about these things in other ways, and as the weeks go on, right, and as things become clear. So these are the 4 things we're going to have you highlight with them about our partnership that I mentioned. Shine on families or shine at home, right? And there's some talking points in here about how much you should describe that and what to highlight within that, right? So that it's really simple and family friendly. There's the piece about their family voice, connecting with others through social capital in our virtual center meetings. Consistent communication, right? Getting into that space of two-way back and forth, using a variety of different methods and talking again, giving families that space to tell you what methods they like, which apps they're comfortable with, how they want to be reached in times like this, and with what frequency, right? And then transitioning into honoring their circumstances through our roadmap and goal partnerships, right? So that's what you are going to focus on, that we simplified and prioritized out of the contract. Again, so remember, anything else, volunteering, a long discussion about attendance, peer card demoing, handbook review, missing paperwork is all not in here, okay? All right, then the A slide is transitioning into that family success mode map. I talked about you, Mrs. Jones, about, part of our partnership is honoring your strengths and circumstances, right? So I'd love to hear from you. What's one hope or dream you have for yourself, right? And again, there's talking points in here. And then you can talk to them about the family success roadmap and the purpose of that, just as you've always done, right? So a little bit of family-friendly language in there so they can see that again on screen as you're screen sharing, but you have that language you've used every other time you've done a roadmap about why we do this, right? About sensitivity and all that stuff about in here is in here, and that you guys can put into your own words as well, right? So then we have the family success roadmap that I am going to go into a little bit, right? Because again, we had to remove our paper forms for the virtual setting, and the family success roadmap was an obvious one, right? Because it'd be very difficult to send a PDF with that many pages to a family and not being able to complete it because you can't, sit across from each other in the same kind of way. So we simplified the roadmap and made it a Google form, right? And so I'll show you that a little bit in a minute. You'll be able to have a Google form link that you can put in the chat box. You can email it to families. You can even text it, right? And you'll still allow family time to complete it. If the family has time right now in that virtual intake, they can complete that Google form link as soon as you send it, and give them the option to have their audio and camera off as they fill it off, right? Or you go off camera, whatever you guys want to decide, right? But then make sure that when the family is ready to rejoin you, that you put the audio and the camera back on and unmute everyone, right? as an opportunity then to discuss their self-assessment. If the family doesn't have time today during your virtual intake, you must schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss it, right? And you'll still send them the Google form to complete in between the virtual intake and the roadmap follow-up. But know that if the family has to meet later, right? If you have to discuss and fill out the roadmap later, you must ask them if there's any immediate concerns or emergencies they need help with now, right? We can't, just like before, have them, walk out of our virtual doors without making sure that they're okay and there's nothing immediate or a crisis, right? Then that final slide is the next step slide, right? Summary of any agreements, right? Maybe they didn't get the FAQ and you need to send that to them, or Dr. Sip's welcome video, right? If you reviewed the roadmap, you're going to talk about goal setting and set that up. Any reminders, right? Okay, we're going to meet to do the roadmap, next Thursday at this time. If you're kind of all, wrapped up and you do have some goal settings or some other things that you need to check in on, you'll schedule that at this time, right? Really get all of that set up with the family. And then you'll thank them for the time like you always do, right? So that's the family facing PowerPoint, right? Super fun, love the visuals, right? Just really will give you something to look at together and guide that conversation and really get families a chance to reflect in the moment with you, right? I think we all know that doing things virtually, sometimes we don't feel as articulate or it's a little more clunky for us, right? Still trying to get that comfort level. So this kind of gives them that space. Oh, I see what she's asking me. Let me think about that for a while, right? And they'll have something for both of you to guide yourselves as you negotiate kind of this new setting together to set your relationships. Okay, so I'm going to just transition then over to the roadmap. Give me a second again to switch back here. Okay. Right? So I mentioned that we created the Family Success Roadmap as a Google form. And again, the reason that we did it is it's much easier to send a Google form remotely, electronically, if you will, to families instead of a huge PDF file that they'd have to print. And right, we know all of the problems that would create. And a Google form still maintains the confidentiality of the family filling out their self-assessment, right? We did not want to go back to filling out this and doing the roadmap as some uncomfortable interview style that you do with them, right? This is still the family self-assessment and still gives them that personal, quiet space to fill this out. Whether they do it in the moment during the virtual intake, do it on their own, and you have a scheduled follow-up roadmap discussion. The other thing that was clear, right? Think back to that rationale. What we wanted to do was simplify and streamline, right? Families have a lot going on. You have a lot going on, right? We're all not through this. So we simplified the roadmap and removed categories. So we took out, for example, the family life practice categories and narrowed it down to 12 items, right? We kept the self-sufficiency items and the support for family health wellness items, right? So you have all the self-sufficiency categories and all the support for family health and wellness, or most of them, right? It's now 12 categories instead of all the others that we had. And the other thing we did was, well, let me back up. We also did this not only to simplify, but we felt like with the teams on the ground that these were the most potentially relevant items given the impact the pandemic may be having on people's lives, right? Mostly on self-sufficiency and their health and wellness. And so knowing that that's probably where you're going to spend a lot of your time supporting and talking with families about that should kind of rise up to the top of what we want to ask them about, right? And we can ask about family life practices in different ways. They're going to get that through Shine at Home, potentially, if they're in our remote option. And so really making sure we get the most critical information right now is why we also narrowed this down. So I don't want to give you the impression that it was just to make a simple form, but what was, again, most important for our work together, right? Then again, to deal with the technical side of the Google form, each category now only has one indicator, so to speak. We eliminated if there were two, like an either or, right? Like housing in the paper format had I am evicted or homeless, right? Well, that really wouldn't work in the way a Google form questionnaire is designed. So now there's only one thing. You know, it's not, oh, I may have this or this. It's just a simplified one statement that might reflect what circumstances they're in. And then the only revisions that we made to any of the indicators was in employment is different and emotional support, because those two categories were very evident that we needed to reflect COVID-19 directly in that, because we know that the pandemic is impacting those the most, and we really wanted to hear again from families if they are dealing with anything around employment as a result of the pandemic, and certainly emotional support, right? So then, as I mentioned, this roadmap, because it's a Google form, can be emailed, can be put in the chat box for a family complete, right? And it can be texted. So if you ideally, right, you're doing this in the virtual intakes like you always do when you give families time to do the roadmap. This is what that link would look like if you were in the chat box for the Google Meet on the left and the Zoom chat in the right. And if you have technical questions about that, see your coordinator or your director or your IT person or anyone that's really good with technology. And certainly I'm always available as well to help you. Right, so just a little screenshot on that. Okay, so on my next slide, I'm going to direct you to some specific tutorials that are to use outside of this training today on the Google form itself. Okay, because I know, right, my mind goes there too, like, okay, what are these logistical technical questions of this Google form for the roadmap, right? How do I access my link? How do I send to families? How do I see the family's responses? And what about insight documentation, right? So I worked with the MSA team to develop a separate tutorial of how-tos on the roadmap as a Google form. And you'll see online right here, there's a screenshot of what that handout looks like, right? Each of you will have your own personal Google link that will only show you families on your caseload, right? So you'll only have your link with your name, and that will help with confidentiality. And then you'll only see the results of your family's responses for families on your caseload, and that will come as a spreadsheet, right? And then you will see those responses in a spreadsheet, and you will document it the same in Insight. So I'm not going to spend any more time on this because, like I said, the separate tutorial document has screenshots and directions and everything you need to know. And if you have questions, please see your DAs for how to use the Google form and the response spreadsheet. But it is really pretty user-friendly, okay? All right, so let's review where we've been. Talked about the rationale, what's the same, what's different, what the priorities for intake are, right? What's really bubbling up for relationship building, a virtual setting, and to simplify and highlight in our partnership together. These slides are designed as they are for new families, but What about returning families, right? Particularly because most people returning in the fall will be returning families because of our program options. You can adapt that PowerPoint that I showed you, that really jazzy green PowerPoint, with returning families. Slides 4, 6, 9, and 10 are the most relevant for returning families. And number 7, which is our partnership slides, are the most critical, right? Because it really highlights our partnership priorities for this year. Okay? Those are the things that parents are going to want to know about and that you're really going to want to get them excited about and motivate them to do, right? Shine on family, shine at home, virtual settings, right? Those 4 items that were on that slide. Additionally, if you don't know a family well, or they're new to your caseload, right? Depending on how many conversations you've been able to have over this summer or as we've been closed, you can add slides 2, 3, or 5, right? If you've never asked them yet about their pandemic experience or about reopening, right? Any of that, or they're new, right? You want to ask them about their hopes and dreams if you haven't before, right? And then what about the roadmap? You have the option of using the Google form with returning families if their roadmap has not yet been updated, right? If you've already updated it in other ways, totally fine. But now you do have this electronic roadmap that's simpler and can also reflect, again, the current circumstances that may have changed drastically as a result of the pandemic. But talk to your delegate leadership for more specifics on how they want to deal with returning families in addition to these tips. Okay? All right, so that's always the bulk of a training where I'm giving you a lot of information, right? Walking you through a lot of things. So this is a chance to pause the video and just do a reflection and pulse check together, okay? Feel free to rewind me if you need to. You can rewatch parts later. You'll have all the handouts. Just spend a few moments pausing the video when I'm done here to think, okay, you've seen my new format, our new format and the tools. What thoughts or questions do you have? What's going to be easy or challenging, right? Where are you right now? What's the temperature you're feeling as you hear about what's the same and what's different, right? If you're in a group, discuss amongst yourselves. If you're doing this one-on-one, make sure to share these questions and what you're thinking about with your supervisor. When you're done writing that on your reflection sheet or discussing it, return, unpause the video, and we'll continue with the training. All right, let's get into some scenarios. Here is our first scenario. Chantel, the FEA, is preparing to be on video with mom, Jasmine. Her 3-year-old daughter, Layla, has been in the center-based option for 2 weeks. Chantel wants to be ready for the intake conversation. First, she starts with short introductions and a welcome. Then what? Pause the video and put the steps of the conversation in order on your reflection sheet, right? What does she do after introducing everybody? What does she do next? And then after that, what is that conversation flow? Okay, pause your video now. All right, welcome back. Here are the answers that you should have on your scenario 1 sheet, right? 3, 4, 7, 5, 1, 2, and 6, right? So 1, ask about the pandemic experience, start learning about the family, listen to them about reopening, safety or health questions. 3, hope and dream. 4, initiating our partnership. 5, adults own hope and dream. 6, family success roadmap. 7, next steps. All right, scenario number 2. Chantel is now clear on the flow of the intake conversation, right? She prepped, she's ready, she knows what her prompts are, she knows which one she has to cut and paste because this is a center-based option and the child's already started. But as she prepares, she wants to ensure she is building a relationship and not doing all the talking about Acelero, right? So on the next slide, how likely is each question to build a relationship with Jasmine and why, right? Which of these questions are going to really build that relationship and keep the conversation rich, right? Are you doing fine now that Layla is at Acelero? Tell me more about what is working well for you in this new normal. How about with routines? How has life been like at home during COVID-19? Fine, says Jasmine. Great. Now that you said all is fine at home, is Layla doing well at Acelero? So for each of these, right, how likely is it? Yellow, green, red, very likely, however you want to answer this. And then say why. Is this going to build a relationship? Is this a good open-ended question or not, right? So pause the video, reflect on each of them, and then we'll come back for some answers about how likely each question is to build a relationship. Right? Welcome back from your discussion. I hope it went really well and you had some nice thoughts about whether these are good open-ended questions that will build a relationship, and if not, why or why not, right? So the first one, are you doing fine now that Layla is at Acelero? Actually, no, this question is pretty closed and it may shut down or lead the conversation, right? Are you doing fine? Yeah, I'm fine, right? Instead of, how are you? Tell me about your experiences. Say more about that, right? That really leads down and could just shut it down. Sure, I'm fine. Move along, right? What the next one? Tell me more about what is working well for you in this new normal. How about with routines? Yes, these are great open-ended questions to continue to learn more about Jasmine and Layla, right? It builds on whatever they might have said, right? Oh, that's really interesting. What about routines, right? What have you been doing for fun, right? All that kind of stuff that again is in that question bank in the talking points of your family facing PowerPoint. What about this next one, right? A little more tricky. How has life been like at home during COVID-19? Fine. Great. Now that you said all is fine at home, is Layla doing well at Acelero? This one's okay, right? How has life been like? Is a really nice open-ended question. It's in that PowerPoint, right? But all mom said at first is fine, right? And the advocate, Chantel, that just jumps right along. Oh, great, you're fine, right? Now everything's fine. Let's do well, right? We all know that, you know, fine only really gets us so far to really understanding the family, right? So the Chantel was a little too quickly to move along and doesn't really try to explore deeper, right? And we'll talk about, you know, maybe the family that, you know, Jasmine's not quite ready, but Chantel also doesn't make one more attempt at trying to probe a little bit, right? And then even that second part makes some assumptions. Is Layla doing well, right? Kind of a yes or no, similar to the first one, right? Instead of how is Layla doing, right? Tell me what it's been like as she's gone back to school. What's it been like for you? Okay, those kinds of things, right? So feel free, right? You know, this is always a work in progress. This is where our practice comes from, using open-ended questions, practicing with somebody to what helps move the conversation along, right? What helps us learn more and really be relationship focused, right? So feel free, you know, if you need to pause the video again to discuss these answers, right? Or spend time after today's training generating some more ways that you can have good open-ended questions that learn more, right? That are purposeful and meaningful. Okay. So always a need to think, right? Virtual settings are very new, right? For some of our families, they might not be having this experience before, right? And this is, again, a chance to get to know one another. So we want to really make the most of that virtual setting, right? We want to make this as successful as possible for both of us and really feel comfortable. So here's some tips I put together. Some of these were from your colleagues in the field as well, is to prep ahead of time. One of the best ways to get ready for a virtual setting, right, and have these conversation prompts is to practice, right? Get the materials you need, make sure that you have your PowerPoint ready, make sure you've copied and pasted the appropriate question in that safety and health slide, and test the technology, right? Before I did today's recorded webinar, I spent lots of time making sure I knew how to screen share, to turn on and off my video, to use the chat box. And when I got stuck, I phoned a friend, right? And I found someone that could help me with some of the aspects of the technology, right? That's always helpful in virtual because we all know, right? Technology, even when it's worked 100 other times before, that day is when it's going to decide to be funky, right? So test it ahead of time, even right before, again, when you get on. Do everything you can to find a quiet space. We all know that we could be working from home still, or there's distractions in the center. Do our best to find that quiet space so we really can hear one another in a virtual setting. And this is a big one, this next one. You are setting the stage, right? We're modeling for families. Make sure your camera shows your full face, right? This a little bit goes back to testing technology. You don't want it up at the ceiling and the family can only see your forehead, right? Or you know, you're cut off on it, right? That you're trying to emulate a in-person setting as much as possible, right? And that is done by seeing each other face on and making sure the audio is clear, right? Again, testing your speakers, testing your headphones, doing a practice run, right? And then when you start asking, can you hear me, right? Am I muted? Is my sound okay, right? Is there anything we can both do to make ourselves hear each other a little bit better? The other tip for a virtual setting, right, is don't multitask. It's often very easy to think, okay, no one's seeing me. I could do some things behind the scenes, right? But it really is obvious on camera, right? If you're off doing something else or, you know, secretly trying to look at an email or your phone, right? That's very clear, and it will send the message to families that they're not your priority right now, and this is just one more thing on your to-do list versus, again, that this is your, you know, special time together to get to know one another. You're going to want to avoid reading the PowerPoint, okay? Luckily, right, it's a nice guide, but we can all have the tendency to just read off of it, right? And that won't often feel very natural and could trip you up a little bit. So just, again, something to practice when you prep ahead of time. Because you also want to make sure that in that video, since it'll be on the top, is you're still trying to maintain eye contact and good body language. All part of really practicing with the camera on it. Taking notes during the intake is okay, right? I think we just have to make sure that you're staying on camera and the family knows what you're doing, right? It's a lot harder when you're not in person, like, what is she doing off to the side there? Is she distracted? Is something going on? What is she writing down, right? You have to really make sure that you're still taking notes, but staying on screen, right? You're not hopping off and they're just seeing the wall behind you as you went off and take notes, right? And then, you know, don't feel like you have to rush this virtual intake. If technology is not working or there's a lot of distractions, it's okay to set up a follow-up, right? You know, okay, you know, we didn't get through everything, but I still have a lot to learn about you to really set the stage for this partnership, Mrs. Jones. Can we set up another meeting? Or, oh gosh, you know, my child, you know, my baby's waking up earlier than I thought from the nap. Oh my gosh, it's okay. Like, you know, if you're comfortable, you know, we can reschedule or we can power through, right? Really take this time to see how the family's feeling and what their comfort level is, right? Sometimes your distractions are not the same as somebody else's, and people are much better juggling a bunch of stuff on screen, right? So keep that in mind. Couple other things just to know, right? If you're having some technology problems, you can ask the family. Maybe scheduling additional meetings, right, really pushes this far too long. Switch to the phone, right? Be like, you know what? I'm having problems, or you know, my internet's slow, so I'm gonna have to go off camera for a second, so that I can maximize our time and we can still look at the PowerPoint together, right? That would be kind of a last case scenario, maybe. And then remember, this is not your only interaction, right? First impressions matter. All these things will help make that first impression a lot known, but you have a lot of other opportunities to continue to hone these tips. Finally, I've referenced several times throughout today's training that we are recommending the video app, right? This is such a great way to see people as much as possible and try to troubleshoot with families ahead of time about what they can do to get online, right? Support them in those ways, maybe do a little coaching, right? Helping them download it, sending them some tips ahead of time. We recommend Zoom or Google Meet for these virtual intakes, right? Again, families may prefer one or the other if they do, right? Sometimes you might not have a choice. Just note that FaceTime or Duo does not allow you to easily share your screen. That would make looking at that PowerPoint together very difficult. So just something to keep in mind if that's the only option families have, that again, you may have to email them a PDF of the PowerPoint or just use it as your own talking points, right? Okay. So troubleshooting, right? I know if we were in person, you'd have questions for me. So I try to anticipate what some of those would be, right? What if the family is not on video, right? So if they have access to the video app, but the camera isn't turned on, make sure you have yours on, right? And that they can see your full face and hear you clearly to model for them, right? And establish this comfort right from the beginning, right? Like, this is our expectation. This is part of our partnership of that two-way communication. We're going to be on camera together. And let families know that, like, kids popping on in the background, totally okay, right? Pets jumping into laps are okay, right? Anything that you need to do to kind of alleviate any fears about, you know, we know that, you know, being online at home can be hard, and we're going to manage through some of those distractions and do our best together, right? But again, encouraging them that FaceTime, face-to-face on video with the camera on is one of the best ways to really get to know each other and put names with faces, again, since we aren't going to see their beautiful faces every day inside our center. You can also ask the family, like, what's it going to take to be more comfortable on video? Right? They may, you know, there may be a bad day, right? That they're like, oh, I'm going to use video on the next time. Something has just come up, right, in the background, right? Try to brainstorm with them if you can, right? Again, and as I mentioned, if a family can't be on a video app at all, the phone is fine, right? Again, if you use that acceptance call to problem solve technology barriers ahead of time, you might be able to get them online earlier than in the moment. They're like, I didn't know I was going to be using Google, right? I want to preface all of that so they're prepared and can find their quiet space on their end, and get what they need to spend the time with you, right? And then I did mention, right, but I'll mention it again, that if the family has email access, you could send them the PDF version of the PowerPoint. Okay, so that's one troubleshooting. Right? You might be wondering now, what if the family is hard to hear or distracted? Well, one thing you can do is politely ask them to mute when you're talking, right? We do that all the time. Well, can you mute? There's a bunch of noise in the background while I ask you this question. And then unmute. Same on your end, right? You can ask them if they can find a quieter place. Be like, oh, you know, I thought this was going to be a really good spot outside my kitchen, but, you know, my kids are having snack. Right? Well, do you want to move to another room? We can take a moment to move your laptop, or, go into another room, or take the time you need to help your kids and just jump back on in a second, right? just brainstorm different ways. If their child is feeling like a distraction, spend some time brainstorming, right? To keep their child busy, just like you would do if they're in the center. Like, oh, do they have, some crayons that they would like, or something, a favorite toy? Like, oh my gosh, feel free to go get it, Mrs. Jones. Like, she have a lovey she wants to play with? Get her set up, and join me back in a second, please, right? Those kinds of things. However, if the distractions really get to be too much and no one can focus and neither of you can hear, or you can't get through all the questions, again, work to reschedule the meeting, right? Right. The last probably thing potentially on your mind is, what if I feel stuck during the conversation, right? Well, my first thought is, some families have a harder time, as opening up, right? This is potentially their first way of meeting with you, and it's virtual, right? So they might be a little reluctant or shy to talk, right? They may not want to talk about stressful issues right now. They're sick of talking about the pandemic or the current climate of things, right? So it's okay. That's why there's also some additional prompts in the talking point notes section of that family facing PowerPoint, right? Maybe that question just didn't resonate with them, right? Try something else if you get stuck or the family doesn't feel like they're kind of opening up enough, right? They're just saying fine, right? Think back to that scenario number 2, right? Don't just move along. Try another prompt, right? Right? Maybe you didn't realize you asked a closed-ended question, like, oh, wait, let me rephrase that, right? And if it still doesn't, kind of open up the conversation, it just, move along then, right? Maybe they don't want to spend a lot of time talking about safety and health, right? But they are all about that hope and dream, right? And that's your opportunity to really learn more, right? That's what makes this conversation flow just so nice, that there's so many opportunities throughout those 7 steps to find that thing that really is going to resonate and open up that conversation to learn more. Right? Also, if you're stuck, remember, it's okay to have silence, right? And pauses. Don't force a family to open up, right? Particularly if, they need that time to think while they're online, right? Or, and if we're all stressed and a little overwhelmed, depending on their emotional state at the time, right? It might take them a little bit to think of something, right? So give them that space. Do a lot of active listening, right? Right? Paraphrasing, using your body language still works virtually and is still important. And again, that's what is finally nice about that family-facing PowerPoint. They can see that question on there and give them some time to think for those that need it. Right? And I've said this, and this is same with when we did traditional intakes, right? That this isn't our one shot. This isn't the chance to tell them and everything about Oscillero and hope that you get every piece of nugget about them, right? This is just the beginning, that you're setting the stage for this relationship for them to open up with you over time, right? So stay positive and use future check-ins, right? All right, so those are the 3 troubleshooting questions that I anticipated you might be having out there in our virtual training webinar today, but you may have others. So pause the video, jot down any other concerns or questions you have, and take the time to troubleshoot them now with your coordinator or colleagues, or use that on your reflection form for future discussions or coaching even. All right, we're nearing the end. All right, thank you for continuing to be active, engaged in today's training for what is just going to be a really nice experience virtually for families, right? We hope. I know it. So if you think all the way back to that slide where I showed the revised timeline, and I showed at the end bucket, right, that roadmap follow-up and goal partnerships bucket, right? So just again, as a FYI, our process and expectations for goal partnerships has not changed. You are still expected and required to follow up based on the roadmap or the family's own aspirations that they shared with you. And just this last bullet as a heads up, you likely are to see an increase in goal setting and support with families due to the pandemic's impact on self-sufficiency, health, or wellness. So again, goal partnerships needs to be a critical part of our expectations as we continue to support families in this unprecedented and challenging time. Okay, our closing reflections. You have your reflection sheet. Choose one of these sentences, right? Complete one of them. And pause the video to fill it out. I am most excited about. I need more support with. I will commit to. My top takeaway is. Pick one of those, pause the video, and then come back. All right, you're back. You had some closing reflections. Hopefully spent some time sharing with your colleagues if you're doing this as a team or with your coordinator about what are you excited about intakes perhaps, or gosh, I loved XYZ, but ABC I need a little bit more support with. That's gonna be harder for me, or I'm still not sure, right? Or, oh, that's gonna be a little bit new, but I'm gonna commit to this. Oh, and I love this top takeaway, right? Those are some things you might have talked about. If I was in person with you, I would love to hear some of those. So let's wrap up for today, right? So again, this was a recorded webinar to introduce you to the refinements of our virtual intake. But we always know, right, we need to continue the learning. Our professional development staff always call this learning transfer, right? So on your screen are several action steps for practice, right? Several ways that you can really feel prepared to conduct virtual intakes. So look at this list. They're also written on your reflection sheet so you can keep track, and make commitments as a team or with your supervisor on when and how you'll make these learning transfer practices happen, right? Couple, I'll read off, brainstorm some of those open-ended questions. Again, the PowerPoint has some of those talking points and question banks in there, but you may have your own that work for you or that you want to think about, particularly beyond just how are you, right? Or if they just say fine, things like that, right? Or how you can continue to learn about what life is like at home and what works really well, right? Review the talking points in the PowerPoint. Practice, 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 putting those in your own words and really getting familiar with that, right? Finding a buddy to practice with, right? Where one of you is the parent and one of you is the advocate, right? Or just, again, when you go back to those tips on a virtual setting, right? You want to test the technology out with someone. Can you see my screen? Am I sharing it okay? Can you hear me? Can you see my video? Did I chat the roadmap correctly, right? Any of those things you want to practice. You might do some breakouts on Zoom with role plays. Your coordinator might model something, right? Make sure, again, you find your Google Forms and spreadsheet, that link and that tutorial, look at that handout, and talk to your coordinator about any specific coaching needs you have, or if you're a coordinator, to your director. So thank you all so much for spending some time with me today on this recorded webinar to train you on our virtual intake process. If you, again, have any questions, start with reaching out to your coordinator, your director, your colleagues for help and support, and then certainly have them direct anything to me. And I wish you all the best. I know I can't wait to hear how these are going. Please send me any feedback, right? And I look forward to seeing you virtually in other formats throughout this year. And we'll be in touch. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.